Welcome back to Fossil Ridge Games. Today I'm going to walk you through how to play the White Castle. First I'm going to show you all of the game mechanics. Then I'm going to walk you through some of the basic strategy tips. The White Castle occurs in the late 1700s in feudal Japan. And this game is going to mix a bunch of different elements together. The first one is going to be dice drafting. Dice are going to be picked and then placed on different locations over the course of the game. Next up you have a light sort of worker placement mechanic. And they give you these nice wooden meeples, which you're going to be placing in various locations throughout the board. The last part of the game is resource management. So I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in on one of the player boards. You're going to have rice, iron, and you're also going to have pearls. So you're going to have to manage this amount of resources in conjunction with worker placement. And then finally, you're going to have money. In addition to that, you're going to have these daimyo seals that you can also spend for resources. So overall, the game is fairly fun to play, and it flies very, very quickly. You only get 9 turns over the course of the entire game to play down whatever it is that you're going to do, so every turn absolutely matters. Overall, the game has a victory point tracker which occurs and appears at the top of the board. So basically what happens is you play the game, and then at the end of everybody taking 9 turns, the game ends, and you simply just count up all of the points, and whoever the person is with the most points wins the game. The first mechanic that I'm going to walk you through is the dice drafting mechanic. As an example, when it is your turn, you have the opportunity to take 1 die from the end of one of these 3 color bridges. Please note that there's a white, a black, and an orange bridge in this game, and the color of the dice actually does matter, and I'm going to walk you through what that means. So in general, you can take one of the dice from the end of the bridge. Once you take a die from the end of the bridge, then you simply move a die toward the portion of the bridge that you removed it from. So in this case, they're going to keep sliding and sliding and sliding, and eventually you're going to get to a position where all the dice have slid, and if you do spend the dice, you can no longer spend that color because they're all essentially gone off the bridge. So I'm going to go ahead and replace those, and I'm going to walk through what happens when you pull a die. So in this case, we pulled a 6 white die off the actual map, and then we get to place it down. So I'm going to go ahead and just give a quick example. Please note that we have a bunch of these gray icons that are present on the board. And if you look at this one, it has 3 pips on it, so the die roll would be a 3. And basically what this means is that I'm going to take this die, I'm going to cover the space that it's on. Now there's a kind of a cool mechanic associated with what number you pick. In this case, if you need a 3 and you place something on it that's much higher, let's say a 6, that would actually score you 3 additional coins. So you could take 3 of these money coins and put it into your reserve area to be spent later. Now, if you take a die that's lower than the number shown, so as an example, maybe we pull a 1 off and we go to this position here, you actually have to pay the difference in money to get to the 3. So as an example, if we place a 1 down, we really need a 3 to go to this spot, so thus we'd have to pay 2 coins. So the die rolls a 1, plus 2 coins would equal our 3, and that's what we would have to do. So what's kind of cool about this game is that the amount of money that changes per die roll is pretty fun, and that's something that's dynamic and changes. In addition to that, once this die is placed onto the table, specifically in a 3 or 4 player game, this then allows the next player to place a die on top of it. And what's kind of weird about this game is, let's say then the next player takes a 6 and puts it on top. That would actually net them 5 coins. So in this case, they would be getting 5 coins because the 6 exceeds the 1 by 5 points. So it's kind of a funny dynamic that you have because you're actually be stacking dice up on the table. And once you have 2 of them stacked on a location, no more can be stacked on that spot. When it comes to dice drafting, please note that on the player boards, there are 3 locations in which the color of the die definitely matters, and you have to place the correct die on that spot. So in this case, if I want to play this spot right here, I have to pull the corresponding color and place it onto my player board. One more note on placement. Although you can put any die in these spots, the color of what triggers matters. So in this case, if I place a white die into this portion of the castle, the only thing that's going to trigger and the only rewards that you're going to get are going to correspond to the die color. So in this case, I have a red, I have a white, and a red. So since a white die was placed, I can only activate this one row. So be on the lookout when you're playing the game for sections of the castle that you can score multiple bonuses. As an example, if you were to take the white die and place it in this location, it would actually trigger both of the reward conditions at the top and the bottom, because both the dice that are shown are white on this particular portion of the castle. The dice also help you track when the end of a game round occurs. As an example, when there are only 3 dice remaining, here in the garden, you know that all of the players in our 3-player game have played all of their turns over the given round. Each player will get 3 turns over 3 different rounds for a total of 9 turns total over the course of the game. So what's nice about this, it kind of gives you a heads up when there's basically no dice remaining and there's only 1 die per person remaining here, so there's only 3 left. You know that it's time to end the round and move on to the next one. Next, for the dice drafting mechanic, there's something subtle in this game, but it's actually pretty cool. So obviously you have the higher number dice on the right hand side of the bridge and the lower number dice on the left hand side of the bridge. And just giving you a quick overview, you can probably get the general sense that the higher the die number value, the more easy and the more versatile it is to use over the board. So dice numbers range anywhere from 1 all the way up to 5. That you can see on the actual game map. And then when you go to your player boards, please notice that there's 3 positions where you need a 6 in order to play that most effectively. So kind of what you're probably thinking is, well, why would anybody ever take the one on the left-hand side of the bridge? And the answer is this icon right here. It looks like a lantern, and the lantern is going to correspond to your player board. So at the bottom of your player board, you're going to have this lantern icon. And please note that whenever you trigger this lantern, you get all of the bonuses that are in this row. I'll get to later on in the video how you actually amass cards down here, but think of it this way. If you go over to the game board itself and you see that, okay, you might have to pay more money when you go to different locations on the map, but if you do take it from the left-hand side, you do get to trigger whatever bonuses you get at the bottom of your player board. So that's kind of a cool advantage, and it's a cool way to kind of play the game. As another example, and I see this quite a bit with new players, if we have a bridge and we have, you know, basically the same thing on the right and the left hand side, so we both have 2s, there's no reason to take the one on the right hand side of the board because you don't get a bonus over here. So always be on the lookout for the left hand side of the board, especially when the dice are equal and equivalent. I see a lot of new players just grab the one automatically on the right. They get conditioned to think that that's the best one to pull. So in this case, they could pull this die off instead, and then they could trigger the conditions at the bottom of their player board and get all of these bonuses as well. The next mechanic that I'm going to walk you through is the turn order tracker, or the initiative tracker as we call it when we're playing the game. Each player is going to have one of these colored tokens that corresponds to the color on their playboard right here. So we can see we have these 3 different colors. Please notice they're all stacked on top of each other in the first position because that's where you start the game. So when you start setting up the board game, whoever's on the top gets to take the first turn, and then whoever is next goes, and then goes and goes and goes. So what's weird about this game, and I thought I was going to hate this mechanic when I first read about it, but I actually love it, there's a variable turn order. So in most games, play just simply goes around the table. You go in a sort of like clockwise orientation around the table, and you just play turn after turn after turn. In this one, it's going to be the green player goes, and the yellow player goes, and the blue player goes. And then what can happen is the initiative, or essentially the turn order, can actually change. So over the course of the game, you can get icons that correspond to this herring, so this bird that's located at the top. So as an example, if you trigger a position on the board, I'm just going to go ahead and show you one. In this case right here, let's say you trigger this icon on the board. What that will do is you take your corresponding marker and then you get to move it 2 spaces. So as an example, for the yellow player, it would move 2 spaces up the tracker right here. And whoever is further along on this tracker basically gets to start the next game round, essentially, and it's going to set the turn order itself. So we're going to go yellow, green, then blue. And please note that the green one's sitting on top of the blue one, so they're going to basically have initiative. Now, if at a later portion the green player moves onto the yellow player, then it's going to go green, yellow, blue as the turn order instead. So you can have these tiles overlapping one another. In addition, this tracker, you can see at the top, we have these daimyo seals, and I haven't really introduced you to them, really, but this is going to be something that you can spend over the course of the game, and it's kind of like a resource. It also acts as a little bit of a variable resource. So in this case, you could spend this daimyo seal, and when you're moving along this tracker, you can move then into the next portion of this tracker. What's the point of that? Why would you ever do that? And the answer is victory points. So you can see that there's a victory point icon. It looks like a fan. And then you can see one up here. What I'm going to do is zoom into that a little bit closer so you can see that. So there's a 3 listed right there, and there's a 6. So while we're talking about game mechanics, we're going to start talking about victory point trackers as well. The 3, if it's yellow, means that you're going to score 3 victory points at the end of the game. There's a summary that you go through at the end of the game, and you go ahead and amass those points. If you, however, get a red fan over the course of the game, which is located right here, you will actually move up your token on the point total tracker. So as an example, let's say you scored 2 points. You would just take your matching piece and move it up on the board. So the red icons are going to be immediate. So you can see it right here also. Whereas the yellow ones are going to be score at the end of the game. So that's a lot of stuff going on that's pretty interesting. So just keep in mind the initiative tracker, and it's a way for you to score points ultimately as well. I'm going to finish walking you through what a daimyo seal does in the game. There are these orange daimyo seals that you can obtain over the course of the game. And please note, they're just put at the top of the player board. You can have anywhere from 0 to 5 daimyo seals. What do they do exactly? They're kind of like a universal resource in some sense. So as an example, if I want to spend 2, and please note that there's an icon here, anything in the game with a red number means you have to spend it. Anything with a black number means that you get something from it. So what this symbol means is that I can spend 2 of my daimyo seals to get 1 resource of anything, essentially. So if you look, there's a rice, there's an iron, and a pearl icon listed in there. I'll try to zoom in, see if I can get it to clear up a little bit. It doesn't help very much. So if you see this right here, I can spend 2 of the daimyo seals to get 1 of anything on this tracker. Let's say I really need an iron. I could then trade in 2 of the daimyo seals for an iron, or I could trade in 2 for a rice or 2 for a pearl. Also up here at the top of the board, when we look at this location of the player board, I can also trade in 1 daimyo seal. So the red number means I lose the seal. And then what I can do is get a money back. So I can do like a 1-for-1 trade just for this. Please note too that you can do this as like a kind of like a fast effect, and you can never have more than 5 of the daimyo seals. So if you get to a point where you're going to get a daimyo seal, you may as well cash 1 in or cash 2 of them in to get something instead of just simply losing it. In the top right portion of the board, you're going to find this wonderful wooden piece. This is going to help us track what round of the game that we're on. So we're obviously going to start on round 1. Each player is going to take 3 turns, then it proceeds to round 2. Each player is going to take 3 turns, then it's going to proceed to round 3. At the end of round 3, you're going to go to scoring. That's really what this fan means. It just means that, hey, we're at the end of the game, and then we're going to have to score anything that has a yellow fan. And there's a summary in the rule book on actually how to do that. Please note that at the end of round 1 and at the end of round 2, there is this icon listed right here, which looks like the garden. And I haven't really introduced the garden yet, so I'm going to go ahead and do that really quickly. And what this is going to correspond to is the left-hand side of the board. And what that means is that go over to the garden, and then you're going to score different things based upon if there's a worker in the garden or not. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick example. Let's say there is a green gardener on that spot, and there's a green gardener on this spot. What this means is that if there is a dice on the bridge, so as an example, there are no dice on this red bridge. If there was a dice on this red bridge, you could score these different bonuses based upon how many gardeners are there. So in this case, you do not score anything, but in this case, since there are dice on the bridge still, the green player would score this condition, which would be a quick bonus. So please note that this only occurs at the end of the first round and at the end of the second round. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom back over to our turn tracker over here, our round tracker. So that's what these mean right here. And then at the end of the third round, you just go to final scoring, and that's going to be your 9 turns. When new players get into this game, the first question that they ask is, hey, which die should I be taking and why? So I'm going to give you my advice on what I think you should do. If it's your turn and you can pull any 6s off the right-hand side of the bridge, that's what I'm going to recommend that you do. You're going to get the most points out of a 6, and I'm going to say that you want to be spending that on your board itself, on your player board. So as an example, I'm going to go ahead and say it is the yellow player's turn. We're going to pull this 6 off this bridge, and what's going to happen is we're going to move 1 die over. It's going to fall off the edge and get stuck there on the right side. Next up, we're going to move over to the yellow player board, and since I pulled the black die, I'm just going to match it up. I'm going to take the 6 and I'm going to throw it onto this portion of the board. Now what you're going to notice, and I'm going to zoom in as best as I can, there are a series of icons here. So what you're going to notice is that there is the anvil, which means iron. So right when I trigger this effect, I'm going to add 1 iron onto my player board. That's a resource that I get. Next up, there is an icon. Let's see if I can zoom in. And it's a little bit hard to see, but this is a gardener. And what that means is that I'm simply going to take a gardener off this location of the board, and then I'm going to go ahead and place it somewhere onto the game board itself. So I'm going to move over to the garden area, and this means that I can place this worker in any of these 6 positions, including the ones down here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The only thing that I have to ensure that I have is enough grain. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. I've got 3 rice that I need to put the gardener in this location. I need to spend 4 rice to put the gardener in this location. And this is kind of one of the disconnects in the game, is that people kind of get ahead of themselves. They try to place the worker, and then they find out that they don't actually have the resources. So if we go over to the yellow player board, please note that they don't have any rice at this point in time. Now, if they did, I'm just going to simulate that the player had 3 rice. We could go over to the garden and place this worker in any location that costs 3 rice or less. So as an example, this one costs 1, 2, and 3. So this gardener could go in this position, or this position. Immediately upon placing the gardener, you're going to trigger the effect on the right-hand side of the card. In this case, it is the well icon. So we're going to just simply drop down to the well that's at the bottom of the board. When we're activating the well, we're going to cover up the dice on the left-hand side, which means that we're not going to acquire or accrue any money from this. So in this case, we're going to get a daimyo seal. We are going to get 1 pearl, and then we're going to get 1 iron. So when we move back over to our player board, we're going to get the iron, and we're going to get the pearl. In addition to that, we're going to take one of the daimyo seals and stick it on top of the player board. Now, we're doing a lot of stuff, but we're still not done. If you look on this row, there's an arrow that points over to you activating whatever is over here. So in this case, we haven't talked about the yard yet, but this is where the soldiers are going to be training, and this is going to allow you to place a soldier into the yard. So as an example, once we trigger this, we're going to take one of our soldiers. We know it's a soldier because it has a sword. Then we're going to move over to the training yard. I'm going to try to show you as best as possible what's going on in the training yard. So notice that there's 3 positions in the training yard. One's going to cost 5 iron, one's going to cost 3 iron, and then the other location is going to cost 1 iron. When we looked at our player board, I'm going to go ahead and zoom over to our player board. Notice that we have 2 iron, so really the only place that we can take this warrior is to place it into the yard where we spend 1 iron. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this thing, put it down into the yard. It's going to cost me 1 iron, but it's going to net me 3 rice. So we're going to pop back over to our player board. It cost me 1 iron to place the soldier there, but it cost me then 3 rice to go ahead and go up this row. Now, please remember I had to spend 3 rice when I put my gardener out, so I'm at 0. So the 0 then goes up to 3. So kind of what I'm trying to get at is these spots on your player board are probably the most impactful and you're going to get the most out of them. So I highly recommend anytime you can get a 6, go ahead and play it into this area. It's going to trigger a string of events. Now, what's interesting about this, as you start uncovering more of these slots, it's going to give you more resources every time you trigger this. So let's say in a subsequent turn, I go ahead and trigger this row again. Now it's going to net me 2 iron on my tracker, so I'm going to go up 2. Not only that, then it allows me to take another gardener and then place it out into the garden. So kind of what you're seeing is that there's a progression. I'll try to zoom in a little bit more. So the more of these workers you uncover, the more bonuses that you're going to be getting. So even though you only have 9 turns of the game, as you get further and further along in the game, you're going to get more and more resources, and it's going to start building up and kind of getting pretty heavy. If you don't invest in your workers over here, you're not going to have a ton of resources. And the other thing about this game is that you're going to have these chain events that are occurring on these cards over here. A little bit later on in the video, I'm going to show you how you get these cards and kind of the flow of the cards going from here and then down below into your lantern area. They're basically going to flip over and then be placed down here, and then another one's going to cycle onto your board, and then they're going to start building up at the bottom. So kind of the name of the game is dice placement, and use your board as much as you can over the course of the game. You're going to score a ton of points, and you're going to get a lot of resources from it. I'm going to finish up with a quick note on the garden. You cannot place 2 workers in the same spot. So 2 of your colored workers can't be in the same spot. This is forbidden. They can be in independent spots. Now you only have 6 workers total and there's only 6 garden spaces. It's going to be pretty unlikely that you're going to place all of them out. We had a brief conversation about the training yard previously, and I want to go ahead and continue this discussion. There's a couple different rules for the training yard. So the first thing you're going to notice is that you can spend 1, 3, or 5 different iron resources to place one of your soldiers in these different spots. You can have as many soldiers as you want on any of these spots. There's no limit. Now, one thing I do want to show you is that if you do place a soldier in the top location that costs 5, notice that it's going to have 2 different bonuses. So in this case, it's going to trigger this bonus, and it's also going to trigger this bonus. As a quick reminder, this is going to be 2 victory points on the tracker immediately because it's red, and this one is going to allow you to take one of your courtesans and put them into the castle. That'll be our next stop as we start sort of talking about the way that the game works. So what's kind of interesting about this game is that obviously there's a pretty big difference between spending 1 iron and 3 iron. And oftentimes when we play the game, there's not a huge difference between the different things that you get from going from the 1 position or the 3 position. So what I've found is that most players heavily favor spending most of their soldiers on the position that gives you just that only costs 1 iron. You don't have to build up all that much to place all of your soldiers out. Something else I want to kind of note, and I'll try to pull these off and zoom in as best as I can. At the end of the game, there's going to be a scoring condition, and this is going to give you a multiplier based on how many courtesans you have in the main
castle, which is kind of in this area right here, and that's going to be our next stop. So just understand that there's a multiplier. The multiplier is going to be identical for the 1 iron position and the 3 iron position. Now, when you get to the 5 iron position, it's going to be 2 victory points, and it's going to key off of all the courtesans in the castle itself. So you're going to get a much larger multiplier if you go to the 5 position up here in the training yard, plus you're going to get 2 different resources when you actually claim that. The real problem is this location here. Sometimes it's kind of like a dead end and you can't really get anything off of it. Now in this case though, if you did send a soldier to it, it's going to trigger this icon, which then allows you to take another soldier and place it into the training yard. So you could potentially have like a chain reaction if you had enough iron. You could place another one and then another one and then another one, provided you have enough iron. So be on the lookout in this game for sort of chain reaction effects when you can place 2 or even 3 of your workers in one game round. There's a possibility that you can get a lot of your workers out really quickly. And then the more workers you have out, the better multipliers you get when you trigger these different rows in the game. I'm going to add a quick clarifying note between using the training yard and then using this row on the board itself. If I place a die here, this is the only time I get to trigger and get these resources, and this is the only time I can trigger this card on the right hand side. So thus I could get the 3 pearls, I could remove one of these soldiers, pay the corresponding iron cost, and then place them onto the board. Then this would trigger the training yard again, and I could potentially put another one out. Now, if I get the icon for the training yard, which was out on the board, so if I were to trigger this effect, it simply allows me to take one of the soldiers and place it onto the board. I do not get these resources, nor do I get the card on the right-hand side of the board. This is only reserved for when you place the die into this area of your player board. Next, we're going to get into the center of the board, which is the castle. So first step, I'm going to put this piece into the screen right here. This is a courtesan. And what we're going to do with this is basically the courtesan is going to start at the front gate and they're going to work their way through the castle. And the ultimate goal is to get to the very top of the castle, hopefully claim one of these rewards along the way, and score you a total of 10 victory points. So let's walk through kind of how this works. Throughout the game, you're going to see the following symbol. This is the castle symbol, and what this means is that we're going to take a courtesan and we're going to progress it through the castle. So the first step on that is at the very bottom. You're going to notice that there's a gate, and there's going to be some symbology present. And if you look at this right here, this means that we can pay 2 of these coins to place one of these meeples at the gates. We're going to go ahead and do that. So this is going to be where the courtesan starts their journey through the actual castle itself. Next up, we see that we have 2 different symbols and there's a slash in between. And notice it says that 2 pearls, you can progress your meeple 1 space or 1 level through the castle, or we can spend 5 pearls and progress that meeple 2 levels through the castle itself. So let's see what that looks like. When I progress my meeple 1 floor through, I'm going to look, and on the first floor there are 3 different locations present, and that means that this meeple can stop at any of these locations. And as a result of that, you can earn different things as you move up. So what do these cards mean, and what are we actually doing with these cards? What I indicated previously in the video, there's a location actually on your player board, which is located right here. And this is a spot and a location to place the cards from the castle itself. Notice that we have a tan color and then we also have this bluish color. So I'm going to pop back over to the map. Here's that brown color again, and here's that blue color. And what this means is that these cards ultimately are going to end up on your player board at this position. So how's that work? Once the courtesan moves up, let's say it moves to this position right here, you get to take this card, and what happens is it's going to move into the active position on your player board. So as an example,
if we start the game and here's the card in the active position on the player board, we're going to take this card, we're going to flip it over, and it goes right here at the bottom of our player board into our lantern position. And then the new card is going to move onto our player board just like this. And what's great about this, it's going to keep the game different as you start cycling these cards through. As the final step for claiming one of these cards, you're allowed to immediately activate one of the white panels on this card as a victory condition for moving your courtesan through and landing on a new position in the castle. Finally, what we're going to do is take a new card and we're going to place it in this location right here. Please note you can have any number of courtesans on these positions as they're moving up through the castle. And notice that your opponents will also have courtesans moving through the castle as well. So at the bottom of the card, and we just touched upon this, if we spend, let's say, 5 pearls instead, then we could move a courtesan 2 positions through the castle. So as an example, we're going to assume that we have a fresh courtesan at the front gates. And in this clip, what we can do is advance it 2 levels through the castle. So I can take this meeple and go 1, 2. Let's say we stop at this location right here. We're going to do what we did last time. We're going to take this card. It's going to replace the one that's currently here. We flip this one over, move to this position. This card now comes into play. We're going to activate the white victory condition that's present on the card. As a final note on scoring, I'm going to try to zoom in as best as I can. We're going to score a different number of victory points at the end of the game based upon how many meeples we have. As an example, each meeple that is at the front gate, each of the courtesans is going to score you 1 victory point. As we go up to the next level, each meeple at this location and on this floor is going to score you 3 victory points at the end of the game. Next up, if you hit this next level, I'm going to throw this meeple over here just real quick. That's going to score you 6 victory points. And then finally, if your meeple reaches the top location, the first meeple that reaches the top can choose one of these instantaneous conditions. In addition to that, notice it's going to trigger our lantern icon. What is the lantern icon? It's positioned at the bottom of your player card. So when you hit this location, you get to trigger all of these effects as well. Please also note that there is an unlimited number of these courtesans that can reach the top, but the first 3 can take these positions, and the additional meeples will be placed over to the side. And then finally, we're going to see that each meeple at this position is going to score you 10 victory points at the end of the game. So overall, as your courtesans move through the castle, it can net you a lot of different victory conditions. It can also net you a lot of instantaneous resource bonuses as you move through the castle. So definitely keep it in mind, though, that to trigger this event, you're going to need 2 coins per courtesan entering at the gate. In addition to that, this is a very pearl-intensive area, and you're going to spend a lot of pearls to get your courtesans to rise through the center of the castle. Now that we understand how courtesans can move through the castle, we're going to have a different conversation, and we're going to look at spending dice in the castle itself. So you're going to notice that on each floor of the castle, you have gray dice listed, and what that means is that you can pick any color of dice. So you can pick either the black, the white, or the orange dice to place out onto the board. So since this is a dice drafting game, as an example, let's go ahead and do that. Let's say it's your turn. You go ahead and you take this 6 dice. You can actually put it in any of the locations here in the castle itself. And we're going to kind of talk about why you would do that and why you wouldn't. So please note that you also have these cubes that are positioned, and these are going to be randomized when you're doing the setup. Notice that these have the colors that match the corresponding dice that you can pull off the bridges. So we have red, white, and red, and I have a black die. So if I were to place a black die here, first thing that would happen is I would trigger this event, and since I'm 3 over, I need a 3 or more. And since I did a 6, the difference between that would be 3 coins. I would net 3 coins. But this is going to be a little bit problematic because if I put the dice here, it won't actually trigger any of these events because it's going to match the color of the die itself. Now, what would be a better option? We can go ahead and then look at the rest of the board. As an example, I can take this 6, I can place it up here. If I place it up here, please note that on this floor, it needs a 4 or more. So in this case, if I go over by 2, that's going to net me 2 coins. In addition to that, once I place the die here, it will net me this condition. Now, we've seen this condition before, and this means that we can send one of our warriors to the training yard. Or something else I can do is look at the rest of the board, and I see something pretty interesting on the first floor. I can also take this die and place it right here. Please note that this is the 3, and since I'd be 3 over the cost to go there, that would net me 6 coins. So let's say I'm the player and I go ahead and place a die right there. What's fun about this location, I can trigger all of the black cube events that are listed in this location. So what makes this fun is that I get this condition up on top. And what does this mean? It means that I can spend a daimyo seal to enter the castle and place one of my courtesans and then progressively move it through the castle itself. In addition to that, it allows me to then gain a daimyo seal and then gain an instantaneous victory point. So as you're playing the game, be on the lookout for locations in the castle and dice that you can spend to really maximize the amount of resources that you're gaining or actions that you're executing over the course of placing things into the castle. We're going to continue our journey around the map board and talk about the well again. As a quick reminder, any number of dice can be placed down here. You see the infinity symbol sitting next to this 1. What that means is that you're going to place the die, trigger the events, and then you're going to move the die over to this side of the well to show that it's been spent. So this spot can never be permanently covered, and you can place an unlimited number of dice in this position. Next, we have the bottom right-hand corner of the board, and this is kind of interesting. We see that you can play a gardener, you can play a courtesan, or you can play a warrior. And notice that you have only 2 dice positions that you can place. So as an example, and they're also gray, if I take this 4 and I place it here, that means I would have to pay a coin to reach this 5. Now, if I place a die in this position right here, I can either trigger the garden or I can trigger placing a courtesan onto the game board itself. Now, kind of what that means is that these different positions are kind of in short supply. So as an example, if I wanted to, I could then place another die on top of this in a 3 to 4 player game. And then this can keep going, so I could place an orange die over here, etc., until I have a total of 4 dice sitting here. But once these positions are blocked, you can't actually use or activate them again. These are fairly highly contested, at least when we play the game. There's a lot of activity that occurs in the bottom right-hand corner of this game board. Now, for new players, I think they kind of overlook this as a quick way to get workers onto the board. Now, as a quick clarification, if I trigger any of these events, what that means is that I go over to my game board and my game mat, and I take the corresponding meeple off and I place it onto the game board. I still have to pay all the associated costs. So as an example, we learned before, anytime you place a courtesan, we have to consume coins to put the courtesan at the gate. If I place any of my gardener workers down, which are these meeples with the rake, I still have to pay the food associated in the garden. So as an example, if I place a meeple here, a gardener, I still have to pay the food to place them there. In addition to that, if I can trigger a warrior, I still have to pay the iron to place them into the training yard at those 3 different spots in those locations. So just because you're triggering the placement of one of your workers onto the board, you still have to pay for everything. In addition to that, and I see some confusion, if I place a worker, that doesn't mean I get to trigger any of these events or the events over here. Now that you have a basic understanding of the general rules, I'm going to go ahead and show you some example turns so you can watch the overall flow of the game. We're going to play a quick game using 3 different players. This is just going to be some example turns. Here's the original configuration for each of the mock players that we're going to be going through. Please notice that they all have differing levels of resources, and all the stuff is explained in the setup in the game itself.
First up, we're going to go to our initiative tracker. In this case, we're going to have the yellow player going first, followed by the green, and then the blue. And we know that that's the case based upon the setup and which one of these markers is on top of the pile. Here is the first turn for the yellow player. We're going to go over to our dice that are on the bridges. We're going to look to see what we have. We're going to pull this white die. This is a white 6. And what that means is that we're going to go over to the player board, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. We're basically going to look at this row right here. I go ahead and I place the die, and what this is going to do is immediately give me a pearl. So I'm going to go ahead and raise up my pearl tracker by 1. Next up, we can place a warrior onto the map. Now what you're going to see is that I don't actually have any iron present, but what I can do is I can trade in 2 of my daimyo seals to give me an iron. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to take these 2 off, and then consequently I'm going to raise my tracker up 1 point to give me 1 iron. Now I'm going to take one of these warriors off with the sword. I'm going to go over to the training yard. And please notice that this part of the training yard, it's only going to cost me 1 iron. So I'm going to go ahead and place the warrior there. And please note too, when I do that, it's going to give me 3 pearls. So I'm going to go over and adjust everything on my board. So first off, I needed to spend an iron to pay for my warrior. Next up, I'm going to increase my pearl tracker by 3. So 1, 2, and 3. We are going to go over to this row, and please notice that now this arrow is pointing to this location on the board. What that means is that I can send a courtesan to the castle itself. So to do that, I'm going to go to the top row. Here is one of my courtesans. I'm going to go over to the front gate on the map, which is right here. And please notice that I'm going to take this and stick it right here. This is showing that I need to spend 2 coins to place the courtesan there. And that's great. So I'm going to go back over to my resources. Please notice I have 2 coins. So I'm going to take these 2 coins and I'm going to pay the cost. And that's going to put the courtesan out onto the front gate. Now, as part of the last part of the castle action, I can spend either 2 or 5 pearls to move this courtesan deeper into the castle itself. So we're going to go ahead and look at our resource tracker. Please note that I do have 5 pearls. So if I wanted to, I could take my courtesan and move it 0, 1, or 2 levels into the castle itself. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. So here we are at the front gate. I'm going to take this courtesan and move it 2 locations up into the castle itself. Move this up so everybody can kind of see what's going on. So I can take the courtesan and pass through the first floor, and then I'm going to hit the second floor, which means that I'm going to have 2 different options for rewards. I'm going to go ahead and look to see what we have. When I look at this, I notice that I've blown through a lot of my resources. I actually have no money left whatsoever. I'm going to take the courtesan. I'm going to put it right here. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to take this card, and then I go over to my player board. This card comes off. It's going to be flipped over, and then this card comes face down or face up right here. Now, when I take a card from the castle, I can trigger the white panel up on top. So we're going to go ahead and zoom in on that. Please note it has 2 coins. So that's going to net me 2 coins. So I'm going to take those 2 coins and put them into my supply. Next up, it has the lantern icon, which means I'm going to trigger everything in my lantern row down here. And that's great. So the first thing I'm going to do is give myself a grain. So I go up a grain. Okay. I also need to understand that I had to have paid my pearls for putting my courtesan 2 levels up into the castle itself. Next up, it's going to net me 1 victory point. So we go over to our victory point tracker. We are with the yellow player, so this comes onto the board. And then finally, we are going to look and we see this crane icon. The crane icon corresponds to the initiative tracker. So we're going to go over to the initiative tracker. I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to move it 1 location. Now we're going to pop back down to the board to make sure that we did everything.
So basically what just happened was a pretty intense chain reaction of events, and it just kind of highlights all the different things that you can do over the course of one turn. Finally, we are going to go up and fix the castle itself. We're going to flip a new card over, and this is going to go face up. So there you go. That's the first turn of the game. The next thing that I'm going to show you is a pretty common opening move. Please notice that the green players just starting the game, they have a fairly limited number of resources. One of the things I see a lot of times on the first turn is a player trying to power load their resources. So I'm going to walk you through what that looks like. We're going to go back over to the board and notice that we have a bunch of dice showing. We have one less die because now we're on the second turn. The green player is going to look and see this orange 6, and that's going to look pretty helpful for starting to power load resources. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like. At the bottom portion of the board, there is the well space. We're going to take this 6 and we're going to stick it right here over this 1. What that means is that I'm essentially overpaying the die number by 5, and what that's going to do is net the green player an amazing amount of money. So that's going to give the green player 5 extra coins. So we're going to go over and then drop all these coins into their supply. Now they have a really hefty amount of money. But guess what? The amount of resources gained from the well doesn't end there. The other thing that we're going to notice is that it's going to net the green player a daimyo seal. We're going to take that and stick it on top of the board. And then next up, I'm probably going to just zoom in so everybody can see it. Notice that there's a pearl and then an iron as well. So that means that we can go back to the green's player board and give them an iron. So I'm going to go up by 1 iron. Okay, and then we're also going to go up by 1 pearl. So now you can see that the green player didn't place any of their meeples onto the table this round, but they have a huge set of resources that they can, in subsequent turns, tap into. I'm going to walk you through the blue player's turn. Notice that we have a pretty limited number of resources, but we still have at least one of everything. We're going to go over to the map itself and notice that we have a 3, a 5, and a 5 showing on the right-hand side on the bridges. We have a 1, a 2, and a 1 showing. I'm going to be most interested in this white die right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that die off, and this is going to force the 3 to fall off the edge onto the right-hand side of the bridge. Next, I'm going to take this 5, and I'm going to go over to the blue player board. And kind of what I'm interested in is placing a warrior out onto the table, and this is going to cause a chain reaction of events. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 5 and I'm going to cover the 6. Since I didn't meet the die number, I have to spend 1 money to take the 5 and make it a 6. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that off to the side. Next up, I'm going to zoom in, and immediately when I trigger this action, it's going to net me a pearl. So I'm going to go ahead and move that up 1 spot. Next up, it allows me to take one of these warriors off and place it onto the table itself. I do have 2 iron showing, so I'm going to move up to the training yard on the board. And please notice that I've got only 2 irons, so I can't go to the 3 and the 5 position. So this warrior has to go into this location right here. Notice that when I go here, it's going to give me 3 pearls, but then I also have to pay an iron. I'm going to go back to my player board, and I'm going to pay the iron, and then I'm going to go up 3 locations, so 1, 2, 3, and that's going to net me 3 pearls. Now I'm going to go over to the right-hand side, and it's going to point to the garden itself. This is going to allow me to take one of my gardeners and place it into the garden, and that's fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and take the gardener off of here, and please notice I only have 1 rice to spend in the garden, so I'm going to go over to the garden locations, which are located on the left side of the board. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I've got 3, 5, 4, 4, 1, and 1. I only have 1 rice, so I can only place this gardener in one of these 2 locations. When I look at what's kind of out here, if I take the gardener and place it here, it's going to net me 3 coins. If I take the gardener and place it right here, it's going to give me basically the option of taking any of the resources, any of the 3 common resources 2 times, so I can get like 1 and 1, or I can get 2 of the same thing, whatever.
In this case, I'm going to take the gardener, I'm going to place it at this location right here, and that's going to net me 3 coins. Since I'm at the beginning of the game, coins are kind of important because they're going to help modify my die rolls. So in this case, I'm going to take this, I'm going to stick it over here, and place it into the blue player's supply, thus ending their first turn. When you get into this game, it's easy to forget all of the different costs associated with things. So as an example, since I did this chain reaction of events with the blue player, I forgot to spend the 1 rice to take that gardener and place it out. Now, one of the things that gets kind of complicated, and just try to keep everybody on track when you're playing this game and just watch kind of what they're doing. I've seen this misallocation of resources occur literally 50 times when you're playing this game. There's so much stuff going on and a chain reaction of events, it's easy to forget to spend the resources correctly, and that kind of makes the game unfair because some players will be able to buy things that they shouldn't be. So just be mindful and keep the other players honest while you're playing the game. Yellow player turn 2. Yellow player had an awesome last turn, but it really depleted a lot of the resources, and there's not much for them to play around with. But we still have some really good moves that we can make. So we're going to see, we only have 2 coins and really not much in here, but we still have 1 rice. So let's go up and see what dice are remaining. We take a look at the board and we can see that we have a 3, 5, and a 3 showing. We also have a 1, 2, and a 1 showing on the other side. So what I'm most interested in is this 5. I'm going to go ahead and pull the 5 off, and this is going to drop the other 5 onto the right-hand side. So now I'm going to take this 5 and look at our player board and see what we can do with that. Notice that I'm going to take the 5 and cover the 6. Since the 5 is a little bit cheaper than the 6 that's required, I have to take a coin and spend it to raise this 5 up to a 6. Next up, we're going to look at sort of the chain reaction of events. First thing I'm going to do is increase my supply by 1 iron. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Next up, I can take a gardener, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it's going to allow me to put it into the garden itself. Notice I only have 1 rice. So first thing I'm going to do is to pay that. And I know that from the last player's turn, there's just a limited number of locations that I can go in the garden. I can either get 3 coins, or I can get basically 2 resources, 2 common resources. The yellow player is going to go right here. And I could, if I wanted, go to this spot right here. The only caveat is you can never have 2 of your gardeners on the same spot in the garden. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I already paid for the rice previously, and now I can trigger this icon twice. What this means is I can go to my player board and take a look at it, and I can get one of these resources twice. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. First thing is I'm going to spend 1 and get a pearl, and then I'm going to do the same action again. So it's going to net me 2 pearls. Now I'm going to go back over to my player board, and I'm going to look at the arrow, and the arrow then allows me to trigger this icon right here because it's pointing to the top panel. That's going to net me 2 coins, which is fantastic because I'm kind of depleted being the yellow player. So I'm going to take those 2 coins and put them into my supply. Next up, we have the lantern icon, which is right here. And the yellow player was smart. They're starting to sort of power load their lantern. So we're going to execute the lantern. What's great is that we have a rice. So we're going to go ahead and raise the rice up. Next, we have a victory point. So we're going to go back to the victory point tracker, and we're going to run that again. Now we have 2 victory points. And then finally, we have the crane. And the crane is going to help us advance down the initiative tracker. So we see this right here. We're going to take this and move it right there. And thus, we had a pretty eventful turn. Although the yellow player is still kind of running out of resources, we still had a great turn. The green player is going to have an epic turn this time based upon the number of resources that they have. So I'm going to kind of break this series of events down into multiple video clips because so much stuff is going to be happening. So we see green is in a pretty awesome position with a ton of resources. They have resources and everything. They have a bunch of coins and daimyo seals. So thus they can do a lot of different things. We're going to move back over to the player board itself, and we're going to start looking at the different options that we have. So the first thing that we're going to notice is that we have a 5 right here, and that's going to be kind of my target for the green player's turn. I'm going to go ahead and pull this die off This is going to drop the 4 onto the right side of the bridge. Next, we're going to move over to the player board, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and we're going to start a pretty massive chain reaction of events. I got this 5. I'm going to stick it right here. Since the 5 is less than the 6, I have to pay a coin. So I'm going to do that. Now I'm going to cover up this location right here. Please notice that the first thing I'm going to see is that I can increase my tracker iron by 1. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I go up by 1 iron. This is going to allow me to then pull a gardener off. So here's the gardener right here. And we are going to take that gardener and look at all the different options that we have. Now, the great thing about this player, the green player, has 4 rice. So that's going to allow a lot more options when we start looking at the garden itself. Pretty much we can go anywhere in the garden with the exception of the top right corner because we don't have 5 rice. So the first thing that I'm going to notice is that, hey, maybe I want to actually put 2 gardeners out this turn. So let's go ahead and get some chain reaction going. I'm going to take this gardener, I'm going to place it right here. That's going to cost me literally all of my rice. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and drop it all the way down to 0. Next, I look at the action board right here, and notice I can spend 3 to do another gardener action. This is kind of wild, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. So notice that I have 3 coins. I'm going to pay that, and then I'm going to go back over to my board. And in this case, it's going to cause yet another gardener to be placed out. So we're going to zoom in and continue on green's epic turn. Where we're at is that we can take another gardener and place it out. Now, you might be thinking, oh, that's kind of crazy because you don't have any grain left. Well, guess what? We can go ahead and continue on this path because we have Daimyo Seals. So what does that mean exactly? Well, you can spend 2 Daimyo Seals to get any 1 resource. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to spend 1 and 2, take these off. Well, guess what? We need a rice right now so we can send our person to the garden. So we're going to do that. So now we have 1. I'm going to pull a second gardener off this. Okay. And then we're going to go back to the map and take a look at what's going on. And since we've been playing this for a while, we know there's only 2 locations in which 1 rice can actually be spent. So I'm going to go ahead and take this character and I'm going to place it onto the game board itself. This is then going to net me 2 different resources. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I have to pay my rice for placing my gardener out. So I'm going to drop that down to 0. Something else I'm going to notice is that, hey, I don't ever want to be in a position where I can't spend any of my workers at a time. So one of the things I notice is that there is still 1 more position on the map where it only costs 1 rice. The other thing I should notice is that at a minimum, to move one of my courtesans up into the castle itself, I need a minimum of 2 pearls. So I'm going to spend that second resource that I got from triggering this over here on a pearl. So in this case, I got a pearl and a rice. So now you can see that this chain reaction of events has been very lucrative when it comes to playing, but we're still not done. So as an example, since I triggered this row here, it allows me to also send a warrior to the training yard. And guess what? We have a lot of resources out on the table. So now what I'm going to do is I can take one of my warriors and go into the training yard itself. So we're going to continue on this green turn. It's going to be a wild ride, but we're going to keep going. So since we were able to trigger this training yard thing right here, I'm going to take one of the warriors and notice that I have 4 iron. So we're going to do something kind of wild. We're going to go over to the training yard. And now what I'm interested in is this position right here. And please notice it's going to cost 3 iron. So I'm going to take this warrior, I'm going to stick it in the training yard right here. I'm going to go back to my player board because I have to pay for it. So I'm going to do 1, 2, and 3. So now I'm down to 1 iron. I'm going to go back over to this position and I'm going to show you something else. So please notice that it allows me to send a second warrior to the training yard. Guess what? I still have 1 iron and I'm going to go ahead and spend it. So I'm going to pop back over to my player board. I'm going to take this worker off here. And I know that I only have 1 iron remaining and I'm going to spend it. So I'm going to drop my iron tracker down. I go back over to the training yard. I'm going to spend an iron and this warrior to go here. That then is going to trigger this icon, which gives me 3 pearls. So we're going to do that. 1, 2, 3. So kind of the name of the game is that you can get these ridiculous series of cascades and chain reactions to occur if you're paying attention to what you're doing. If you have a decent amount of resources, that is money, daimyo seals, and at least several of the resources in each of these positions here, you can have some really crazy and amazing turns. So hopefully you kind of saw how epic your turns can be if you can power load your resources at the beginning. That's really why I wanted to show you sort of this green strategy of power loading resources so that you can have these epic turns. This is going to be the second turn for the blue player. I'm going to go ahead and walk you through this. The blue player has kind of a weird stash of resources, a decent number of money, but has no grain. So this is going to be a little bit clunky. Since the blue player is at the end of the initiative tracker, they're not going to be getting a lot of the really good dies over the course of the game. So they're going to be struggling just a little bit. We're going to go ahead and look at the player board over here, or the map rather, take a look what's showing. In this case, I'm going to be interested in this black 4. I'm going to go ahead and pull that off. And now we're going to talk about the bottom right-hand corner of the map. And we have these 2 different positions right here. The blue player is going to be interested in getting one of the courtiers out onto the game board. So I'm going to take this 4 and place it right here. Since the 4 is less than the 5, it's going to cost the blue player 1 coin. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, take a coin out of the supply and remove it. Basically what this means is that I can take a courtier from the top of the board and put it into play. Please notice, anytime I take one of these off, I'm going to have 2 coins to get them to the front gate. So in this case, I already know that cost because I've been playing the game a little bit. I'm going to take these off and put them over to the side. I'm going to go ahead and show you what the front gate actually looks like. So here we go. Here's the 2 money that I saw. I'm going to take this courtier and put it right there. Next, I can trigger the next line. So I can either move 1 position up into the castle or 2 positions up into the castle, depending on how many pearls I have. I'm going to go ahead and look at my player board, and I do have 5. So in this case, I can move up to 2 positions deeper into the castle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go back to the front gate, and we're going to take a look at kind of what's showing, which means I can move up to these positions up here. Now, I'm going to do something kind of interesting to really illustrate something fun that you can do. I'm going to take this courtier, move it up 2 positions, and that's going to then net me this card right here. I'm going to take this and go over to my player board and cause this to occur. I'm going to take this off right here, stick it right here. I have to remember to pay my 5 pearls for my courtier. Now I'm going to take this card and stick it on my player board right here. And this is going to allow me to move 2 positions up the initiative tracker. Now blue has been struggling a little bit over the course of this game so far. And the reasoning behind it is they're kind of going last in the turn order, so it's been a little bit clunky. So in this case, we can trigger the crane twice. We're going to move 1 position and 2. Notice now that the blue icon marker is on top of yellow. If blue can retain this position, it's going to allow blue to be at the beginning of the initiative order starting round 2, which is going to be kind of fantastic. And what that's going to mean is that blue then has first choice on the dice that appear here, and it gives them a real advantage. So we're going to go back over and look to see what's going on here too. Please notice that we've altered this card and it goes right here. Next, we move back up to the castle itself. Since we purchased this card, we're going to take another card right here, flip it over, and place it right here. This is going to be turn 3 for the yellow player. What I want to illustrate in this turn is how to start preparing for the next game round, and that's what we're going to do. Notice that the yellow player has a minimal amount of resources, no daimyo seals left, a decent amount of gold. So we're going to pop up to the board and take a look at what we have. And in this case, I'm going to kind of show you what happens if you pull a die off the left side of the bridge. We're going to go ahead and grab this 2. And then what we're going to do is go down to the bottom of the board, and we're going to go to the well. So in this case, I'm going to take the 2 and place it over the 1. That's going to net me 1 coin. So we're going to go ahead and do that. In addition to that, it's going to give the yellow player 1 Daimyo Seal, so I'm going to go ahead and take that. In addition, we get 1 pearl and 1 iron. So we're going to flash back over to the board. So an extra money, Daimyo Seal, and it's going to give us 1 iron and 1 pearl. Now, what's nice about this is that we got a couple resources, but we're still not done. Since we pulled the die off the left side of the bridge, we get to trigger this lantern icon. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're going to flash down to the yellow board. I'm going to zoom in on the bottom of it. So first thing we're going to do is generate a rice. So we're going to go ahead and do that and pop this up 1 position. Next we get a victory point. So we're going to go up to the game board and just move this marker up 1 location. We're going to pop back and notice that we have the crane icon, which means that we can move that piece on the initiative tracker. So we're going to pop up to the top of the board. And if you remembered previously, and we're going to go ahead and zoom in as best as we can in this location, the blue player overtook the yellow, and now in this case the yellow marker can move 1 position. So instead of the blue player leading the initiative tracker, the yellow player now actually does, which is a good benefit. It will allow the yellow player to potentially have initiative for the next set of game rounds. Green player turn 3. I'm going to illustrate something cool that you can do with 1 die. I'm going to go ahead and look, and I see that there is an orange die. That's a 3. I'm going to go ahead and pull this off. This falls over. Then we're going to go ahead and place this onto the board. Notice at this location, the castle, there are 2 orange dice. A 3 matches the 3, so no money is exchanged for this transaction. Now we're going to zoom in. Since a red dice was placed here, it allows both of these lines on the card to be triggered, which is great. So the first one says, burn a Daimyo Seal to go into the castle. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go back to our player board. We're going to go ahead and burn this Daimyo Seal. And that's going to allow us to execute a command at the front gate. So we're going to take one of our courtiers, and we know that it costs 2 gold to send a courtier to the front gate. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to zoom up to this position on the board. Here comes the courtier onto the game board, and we can either spend 2 or 5 pearls to progress through the castle itself. Green player has 5 pearls. We're going to drop this all the way down. This allows us to move this green marker up to 2 floors into this castle, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to move up to this space right here. We're going to pull this card off, zoom back down to the player board. This one's going to come off, get flipped over, move to there. This comes onto the game board, and then since we got one of these cards from the second floor, we can activate this panel. So what's kind of cool about this is that we get 3 resources basically of any type. We know that we need a minimum of 2 pearls to move one of your courtiers, and we also know that we need at least 1 iron to do that. So in this case, what we've done is kind of gotten a couple resources for the next turn, and we were able to move one of our courtiers into the castle. Now, as a final part of your turn, what you can do is we got rid of this line right here. Now we can also activate this row right here. So in this case, we're going to go back to our resource board, and we can add an additional iron. And then we can add an additional rice as well. So by spending the orange die in this position, we were able to run a couple of different lines of commands, and it was pretty cool. We got a lot out of it. It's going to be the blue player's third turn. Really bad resources right now. We only have 1 iron showing. So let's see what we can do with this board. And we're going to do something similar to what the last player just did. We're going to go ahead and take this orange die, and we're going to kind of do the same thing that they just did, except in a different position. So the 3 matches the 3 on this side. No gold is going to change hands. We're going to run this top row because it's an orange die. It says that, hey, we can add 2 victory points on. So we're going to go ahead and go up to the board at the top. Take the blue marker and place it on number 2. It means they got 2 victory points for this turn. Next, we're going to go back to the game board and take a look at the second row. And this says add a daimyo, or I'm sorry, the bottom part it says spend a daimyo seal to send somebody to the training yard. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to go back down to our game board. We're going to spend our 1 daimyo seal. And this is going to allow us to take one of our soldiers, which is right here, and put it on the training yard. Now, we only have 1 iron, and so guess what? We're going to spend that iron. Now we're going to go back up to the game board, and this blue warrior goes into this training yard for 1 iron. That's then going to trigger this reward condition, which is going to be gaining 3 pearls. So we're going to go back to the player board and add 1, 2, 3 pearls onto this resource tracker. What was nice about this turn is kind of the same thing. We were able to get an additional worker off of our playboard. In addition to that, we were able to build up some of the resources, specifically the pearl, over the course of this turn. That's going to put us in a better position for the next round. And the reasoning why is that the more of these workers you have off the board, the better the rewards are when you spend one of these dice. When there's only 3 dice remaining on the bridges, 1, 2, 3, that means that you've hit the end of the game round, no matter how many players are actually playing the game. And what the first thing that you're going to do is set the initiative tracker for the next round of the game. So we're going to go ahead and look at what's happening. So we had some of these crane markers moving over the course of the game round, and that's going to determine the initiative for the next round of play. So the one in the lead is the yellow, so we know that the yellow crane gets to move first, and thus they have initiative on the next subsequent game round. But now we see that there's a change in position between blue and green, so we're going to go ahead and swap the positions of these markers. So next is blue, and then finally green. So we're just simply going to go from right to left. So blue's next, and then finally green. So this is going to set up our turn order for the next round of the game. The next part of the game round is to move this wonderful dragonfish token. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the iconography that's present on the board. Please notice there's a bridge, and it looks like a dice sitting under the bridge. This means that we're going to trigger effects in the garden and based upon the gardeners that are presently there. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and move this forward. Then we're going to go over to the garden itself. So the first thing you need to understand about the end of the round is that the only sort of workers or meeples that get bonuses are the ones in which there is a die on the bridge and there's a meeple present in the garden itself. So if we look at the first row, we have no actual gardener meeples. On the second row, we have no dice sitting on the bridge, but we do have the meeples actually sitting in the garden. And so this is going to then leave us to the bottom row, in which we have a yellow and a green meeple, and we have dice on the bridge. What that means is that in player order, they can trigger the effect on the card, so both the yellow and the green player would each be able to get 1 resource of any kind twice. For the final part of the round, we're going to just start grabbing dice. So I'm going to pull them off of everybody's player boards. We're going to pull them off the board itself. And we're going to pull them off the bridges on the left-hand side of the game board. All we're going to do is just simply re-roll the dice and organize them in ascending order. So we do 3, we do 4, 5, and 5. And we're going to do that for the remainder of the colors. And you can get some pretty interesting combos of dice. I just went ahead and rolled these, so you can kind of see what's going on. And basically what happens are these are the dice for the next round of the game. In conjunction, we now know the turn order for the next round of the game. And we have moved the fish marker to the next round of the game. So guess what? The game round is going to start over. And we're going to proceed with the yellow player, their 4th turn. So at this point, I think I've shown you enough example turns for you to understand the basics of the game. As a final parting note, this game only has 9 turns. So since the second round of the game started, each of the players is going to have 3 different turns, and then this fish marker is going to proceed to the next level. Please notice in rounds 1 and 2, you're going to score the extra bonuses in the garden, okay, over here for your meeples, your gardener meeples, if there are dice on the bridge. When you hit the end of the game, so let's say we have our fish marker right here and we basically only have 3 dice remaining, the game ends. You don't actually score anything on the bridges, but you go immediately to final scoring. Final scoring is outlined in the book, and it's a pretty easy process to follow. You just simply go step by step and add up the victory points at the top of the tracker. So as you can see, each of the colors that are playing are going to have these colored victory point markers. You go ahead and just move them down the track, and whoever the person is with the most points will win the game. All in all, the White Castle is a fantastic game. It has a pretty small footprint if you're looking for something that fits into your game collection. In addition to that, the setup time is very minimal. It only takes a few minutes to set up the game. And what is kind of even more important about that is that the games flow very, very quickly. Especially if you're playing 2-player games, we were able to finish a game anywhere from between 15 and 20 minutes. So once you understand the rules and once you understand how scoring works, you can play a significant number of games in a short period of time. This is a great way to have sort of a game night and put sort of a medium difficulty game onto the table. Literally, it only takes maybe, 10 or 15 minutes to learn the game. By the time you hit the end of the game, each of the players has a pretty good understanding. Once you hit the second and the third games, you can start fine-tuning your strategy. There's a lot of really cool things in this game when it comes to different combos that you can perform and all sorts of different ways that you can keep your turns going and just keep building up those score points and those score trackers. This game I highly recommend. It was pretty cheap to purchase, it's easy to play, and it's a lot of fun, with the ability to pack a bunch of games into a short period of time. So I want to thank everybody for joining me today, and as always, have fun gaming.